And we are back with more on News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petrona Show. Well, I guess nobody should be too shocked. The fact that now the RCMP is investigating the leaks. Yeah, the whistleblower. That's the real threat. Not the fact that Justin Trudeau may be colluding with the Chinese to rig, to subvert the will of Canadian voters in at least one election, maybe even two. You would think that that would be the subject of a major RCMP probe, but no, the real problem is over at CSIS, where somebody is leaking potentially very damaging information to mostly the Globe and Mail, who have filed a number of devastating stories to the point where even some of Trudeau's longtime sycophants and apologists at the Globe and Mail, at the National Post, and elsewhere are coming around to the idea that maybe this guy may really be a Chinese asset. You would think that we would be in the midst of a crisis needing radical investigations here by the RCMP on this prime minister, but no. And therein lies the state we are now in. Extremely troubling information now coming out that the cops now are going to go after the whistleblower rather than Trudeau himself. And so we're in the midst of a crisis here. Andy Lee, welcome to the show once again. You've been doing some fantastic work exposing Trudeau's links to the Chinese, not just Trudeau's, but Chrystia Freeland's and others, the government ties to the Chi-Coms that who knows how deep they go. And so good for you for going down that rabbit hole. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. It's good to be back. Yeah, it's quite a rabbit hole to go down. It's been a wild few weeks. We had, the leaks. Then we had them release the report from Morris Rosenberg on election interference. And of course, he was, the head of the Trudeau Foundation at the time when they took in those donations from, apparently it was directed by the Chinese Communist Party government. And, his election, assessment was that, that the safeguards were working. But, there's a lot of questions around that because it wasn't just that he was the head of the foundation. I actually found a document at the signing ceremony saying that Morris was the person who actually was at the signing ceremony when that donation was taken in. So I have some questions about that. And yeah, there's just so much, but it's kind of like the whole web is, coming unraveled right now. And I would, really question not even just the last two elections. I would go right back to 2015 because we've also seen some disturbing stuff, some stuff about, large donations, max donations coming in from, certain ridings into Papineau, which was Justin Trudeau's riding.
Yeah. We'll talk about Handong because in the GTA. Okay, so here's your tweet. This is you delivering an award to the head of the Chinese Canadian Society for Political Engagement with Handong, who really is at the center of much of the allegations of our Handong, of course, the guy who appears to have been shoehorned in there with the help of Chinese communist connections. And so talk about this story. Talk about this third-party organization established to create a voting alliance. What's up with that?
Yeah, so this was, it was something that was discovered by Bob Mackin. So I didn't discover it, but I did discover that, it's supposed to be a nonpartisan voting alliance created to, increase Chinese engagement in voting. And that's fine. But, Bob brought this up years ago, is that this, this clubhouse is very, very secretive. All of its windows are papered out. Which is odd in and of itself. And the business address is linked to an address in China. So, when you're looking at sort of foreign influence, it's sort of like, is this the kind of thing that we're looking for? But what I did find is that it's obviously nonpartisan because this club and the people who run this club are visited by Liberal MPs, right? So Handong went there last summer. He gave them an award. For their success on their voting alliance. And then, I put that out, and then a couple of days after, CSIS dropped the leak that they felt that he was at the center of one of these ridings that was interfered with. So And then, another, we see that Talib has been there. So it's kind of like, what's going on in these third party establishments, right? And these cultural associations and things like that. And I think it's a really fair thing to look at as whether and again, it's fine to increase participation in our democracy. That's an important part of our democracy, right? We want people to participate. But when you have this voting alliance that's being visited by Liberal MPs that's tied actually to addresses in China, you have to question whether I mean, whether that's the sort of foreign influence that we're looking at, right? So I've been really kind of honing in on what that voting alliance has been doing, and it's not just Liberal MPs. They also, plug Ken Sim and things like that on WeChat. So, and there's been a tremendous amount of controversy around Ken Sim and some of his associations. So, I mean, that's just where we're at. But I think, when we look into foreign interference, we really have to start scrutinizing what these third parties are doing. And these are the sort of things that might be subjected if we ever actually got a foreign agent registry. These are the kinds of things and the kind of people that might be subjected to, register under that sort of a registry. And that's
Yeah,
why
but
something
Trudeau
so
seems to be in no rush to do that. So he banned TikTok now, finally. I mean, this was a sop to people who were saying that he was colluding with China. So he threw that to people as if to say, there you go, you happy? He was never going to do it. He didn't want to do it. And so he is still dragging his heels on an investigation. He doesn't want it to happen. Lord knows what would be dug up if that were ever to happen. I think Jagmeet Singh now is potentially one guy who should be investigated as well. Here's a guy who's been propping up the Liberal government, but who knows what kind of help he got. Bob Mackin's been doing a tremendous job out in the West Coast. And he says that Jagmeet has incredibly close ties with Chinese Communist Party members and connections in the West Coast. Talk about Wealth One here, approved after Liberal cash for access fundraisers held with the bank founder has been hit with a large almost $700,000 fine for committing 4 violations. So this is what is Wealth One? What's the background of this institution?
So this dates back to when Justin Trudeau was having his cash for access fundraisers with Chinese businessmen. So he met with the founder, who's Shanglin, and shortly after this fundraiser, this bank was approved and green lighted. So there was a lot of questions as to what sort of lobbying went on in those fundraisers and whether this approval was given the sort of scrutiny that it deserved, or whether it was maybe given some favoritism because he had received donations from the founders at the Liberal fundraiser. And then about a week ago, a story came out showing that a lot of the people who contributed to Justin's Papineau riding came from the area and some of the people who were involved in this bank way back in 2015. So, it was kind of like, were they priming him to get this bank approved? And then about maybe, I'm not sure if it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, Chrystia Freeland came out and she said that this bank has national security concerns. And then today, obviously, she must have seen this coming. FinTrack dropped that they had charged the bank, almost $700,000 for violations. They don't say that it was money laundering, but they say that there were large transactions that the bank should have flagged as being possible money laundering. So really, really concerning, right? And I mean, this has been going on for so long. Like I said, this goes back to 2016. So, I think that when we're looking at the election interference that's going on, 2019 doesn't cut it at this point. Like we really should be going way, way, way back to the beginning, to even 2014. And see what kind of donations were pouring into the ridings and things like that and where they were coming from. Because again, Justin Trudeau seemed to get a lot of donations from people who were involved with this bank from British Columbia, right? And then the bank was approved. Now it's a national security concern. FinTrack has nailed it with some fines. So, I mean, this is the sort of thing that's been going on, right? It's been going on for a long time. It's really, really concerning. And I just don't know if, we've heard that the RCMP, we heard in committee that they're not investigating because they didn't know that the threshold was met. They know that there is interference. Nobody's saying there wasn't interference. We know that there was interference, but they seem to think that it wasn't enough to sway the results of the election. But I mean, of course, we've got Kenny Chu, who says that he did lose his riding because of foreign interference. That happened through, apps like WeChat and things like that. And of course, Kenny was the one who tabled a foreign agent registry, and he was tremendously popular in his riding as well. He put a foreign agent registry on the table, and he said that he was, the victim of a campaign against him, maybe by people who were influenced by China, and he ended up losing his seat. And I don't think it was a coincidence that he was the one that tabled that foreign agent registry and happened to be a target, right? So, I mean, it's just mind-boggling that this has all been going on. And, good for the CSIS whistleblower for,
Yeah.
we've got somebody who's gone rogue. And, it might
Yeah.
not be CSIS because we don't know exactly who had those CSIS documents, because we know that Jody Thomas said that she had received briefings. So it's also possible that the leak isn't from CSIS. It's possible that the leak is from, inside sort of the PMO, right? If they had those.
Wow. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, I mean,
But
it's a possibility, right?
do you think Bob Fife and Steve Chase have anything to worry about here? I mean, the government may decide to go after these journalists who you would expect would not be under any obligation to reveal their sources. And yet the government may try to use official secrets or some other legal maneuvers to demand that the Globe and Mail give up their sources. Do you
Yeah,
think
well,
that's possible?
I don't know if they're worried. They're very, very good reporters. They've been working on this for a long, long time, along with a lot of others, right? Terry Glavin's done tremendous work as well, and others, and Bob Mackin. So I don't know if they're worried. I'm not sure what the RCMP is allowed to do in their investigation, and if they can compel journalists to give up their sources. I want to read more about. Then I don't know all of the particulars when they're doing an investigation of this sort. And this is sort of probably a little bit of an unprecedented investigation. It's the RCMP investigating our own spy service. So, I mean, that's a little bit wild, right? And I don't know all the particulars, or how they're going to be compelled to give forward information, or if they can be compelled to give forward information. So I'm just not sure about that. That's some homework that I have to do for myself. So I don't think that they're worried. I think we're all really proud of what they've accomplished, and Sam Cooper as well, right? Sam Cooper, has been on the forefront of getting this leak out. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really, really concerning time in our democracy when, we need our agents or somebody within government to, leak out documents and voice concerns. And of course, the government's just stonewalling, of course, investigating this. They don't want to investigate themselves. We heard from Justin Trudeau that he said he hadn't been briefed. That was completely blown out of the water in committee by his own national security advisor, Jody
Yeah,
Thomas.
he's lying.
He was briefed on multiple occasions. I mean, I don't know how he gets away with this stuff. I just don't get it, but he does, right? But I do think that this might be, the beginning of the end of this Liberal government this time. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to wiggle their way out of this.
Andy Lee, coming to us from beautiful Calgary, Alberta, which is in the midst of its own election campaign. Last time I saw some polling out there, it suggested that Rachel Notley and the NDP are actually leading. I mean, Calgary is going to decide it one way or another. But Calgarians aren't that crazy, are they? I put out a tweet recently that asked Rachel if she thought the Chinese were trying to rig Calgary for her. But not surprisingly, she didn't answer. I don't know. Is there any talk about the possibility that there might be some electoral hanky-panky in Calgary during this all-important provincial election?
I haven't seen it provincially, but I did find, yeah, you had it up there before briefly. It was a Reddit post that was posted 5 years ago. And he had said that he had analyzed donations in 2015 to Justin Trudeau's Papineau riding, and he found that it was irregular. Some of those donations that were coming in, they were all max donations. They were all Chinese surnames. But he didn't just flag Justin Trudeau. He also flagged Jason Kenney's riding. Now, Kenney was, foreign minister at the time, so it sort of makes sense. But again, I think it's just like, it's not just a partisan issue, right? We have to go back and we have to analyze all of it and find out how far back it's gone, right? It's gone farther back than 2019. It's been happening for a while. I don't think it's just Justin Trudeau or the 11 MPs that are influenced. I mean, I think we all know that this happens, but it just sort of like, have we been safeguarding this and scrutinizing this properly? Because when I looked at the donations, I was like, yeah, this is really weird, right? But I mean, why wasn't this flagged by Elections Canada? I mean, I ran in the federal election. I can guarantee you, if I started taking in $1,500 donations from a riding that I had basically no association with at all, we'd notice.
Yeah,
Like, we would
something
have
like 2/3 of all donations to his electoral campaign in Papineau came from BC. 2/3. So that's the number I saw. It was posted by Jerry Ritz. I want to play this video this was posted by Pierre Poilievre. Trudeau is trying to cover up election interference from Beijing, and his NDP partner is helping him do it. Will Jagmeet Singh grow a backbone and defend Canadian democracy? The NDP is helping Trudeau cover up Beijing's election. Here it is. The NDP moves for an inquiry and voted for one at committee. Trudeau slaps down questions about public inquiry into election meddling. And now Jagmeet and the NDP are dead silent, backing and caving to Trudeau. The NDP is putting their conclusion with Trudeau before protecting the country's democracy. Tell Jagmeet and the NDP, stop caving to Trudeau. Stand up for Canadian democracy. Wow, I mean, it's true. The NDP looks terrible here, Andy.
Well, they always look terrible to me in general, to be honest, Mark. I mean, Jagmeet is just, he's just driven that party right into the ground. And really, it's the Conservative Party that's become the new party of the working man. So, yeah, I mean, he doesn't look good propping up Justin Trudeau. It's not a good look. I mean, I think that all the opposition parties, and I think that the Liberals themselves, I mean, if there's nothing to hide, then open the books, right? If somebody accused me of election interference or foreign interference when I ran, I would say, okay, here's my books, right? Like, here it is.
Yeah, but you weren't guilty of anything.
But I know that I didn't do anything wrong.
I mean, is Jagmeet protecting the Prime Minister, or is Jagmeet Singh protecting himself?
There's a very easy way to put all the speculation to rest, right? And the longer that they put it off, the digger the hole they're digging, the digger the hole they're digging for themselves.
The deeper the hole they're digging, I think they're trying. Say that 50 times fast. Yeah, no, absolutely. He looks terrible here. The question is, I think there's such a level of frustration amongst Canadians who say, we're stuck with these clowns. You got this horribly corrupt prime minister, quite possibly a Chinese asset, and you've got the NDP that is just holding on for dear life to this coalition and propping him up. This is a terrible situation we're in. Terrible.
Yeah, well, I mean, the NDP used to be a different party, right? I mean, Jagmeet's really taken it in a sad direction, I think. I used to actually like the NDP, if you can believe it, back when I was younger. But I mean, if Jagmeet wants to attach himself to this sinking ship, then I say let him do it and sink with it, right? I mean, I think the party's ready for a new leader and a new direction, one that's, willing to actually play the rules, an opposition party instead of a coalition party. I think he's done a tremendous disservice to his voters and the people who voted for him, by hanging his hat on the Liberal Party's coat hook. So, yeah, and I mean, there's just so much going on, right? I mean, like I went back and I found this picture. I mean, when Justin Trudeau says, that they didn't know that they were taking donations, this donation was given back by the Trudeau Foundation. So, I mean, they obviously feel like it's tainted money. And they're taking the leak very seriously. The leak that Justin Trudeau says is inaccurate. He says that there's inaccuracies. Well, the Trudeau Foundation found that it was serious enough to actually return this donation to the people who donated. That was Zhang Bin and New Genshing. And I mean, Justin Trudeau was like, well, I had no idea that these people donated to the foundation. That's totally bonkers. I found a picture of him with the person who donated at a sleepover party at Wilson House on Meech Lake. So I'm like, you're going to tell me that you didn't know, you didn't know that this guy donated to the foundation and that this was going to cause huge problems. And I have problems with Morris Rosenberg. Again, he was the one who was actually at the signing. He accepted the donation, and he's saying that everything is fine. There's nothing to see here. Well, I mean, come on. The PRC consulate was there when you accepted the donation, and had no inkling that this might be linked to people in Beijing who were trying to buy favor.
Yeah, speaking of Rosenberg, let's listen. This tweet by CTV question period. How is Morris Rosenberg responding to credibility criticism over his 2021 election protocol report due to his previous role with the Trudeau Foundation?
Headed up that foundation when during the time, rather, that a Chinese businessman who has ties to China, the Chinese government, rather, made a $200,000 donation. This week, the foundation returned that donation. The leader of the Bloc Québécois, for example, says because of your work there, because of that involvement, you yourself have a deficiency of credibility. How do you respond to that?
So I'd say, first of all, I mean, I have a number of things to say about it. First of all, I'd say I have worked a 34-year career in government that was split between working for liberal governments and conservative governments. I was a deputy minister for 17 years under first the Liberals and then the Conservatives. And when I left and joined the Trudeau Foundation, you have to understand the Trudeau Foundation is named after Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
Yeah, that's not Justin. It's not named after Justin Trudeau, Andy. It's named after Pierre. That's completely different. The nerve of this clown. Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole reason that they made this donation is because they were Chinese nationals, so they couldn't directly donate to Justin Trudeau through Liberal fundraisers, right? So this is what they did in lieu of donating to him at Liberal fundraisers to get around those donation rules. But I mean, like I said, Morris, I mean, I'm sorry, you were there with New Genshing and the PRC consulate when you took that in, and he has a tremendous amount of experience. That's true, but I mean, why did he not at the time say, "Geez, is this good?" Right? I mean, the optics were certainly bad. And like I said, the foundation had to go and return that money. They obviously feel like it was indeed tainted and that the CSIS leak was, legitimate enough for them to say, we're going to return this money. So, I mean, like, why didn't he himself flag it? Like I said, he was at the ceremony. He didn't have, the foresight to think that this is going to be really bad. And I mean, everybody thinks that this donation was made in 2016, and Justin Trudeau was investigated by the Ethics Commissioner because there was a question of the timing, and everybody said we didn't know the timing of this, but it seemed like it was made after Justin Trudeau was elected. That's not true at all, because I went back and I found Chinese articles with Alexandre Trudeau, Justin's brother, in 2014, in summer of 2014, while Justin Trudeau was still involved in the foundation, saying that they were accepting this donation and that this donation had been made. Maybe it didn't get actually put on the books until 2016, but this was cooked up while Justin Trudeau was involved in the foundation. There's no question about that. So, I mean, I have a huge problem with the ethics commissioner saying she couldn't pinpoint the timing. There's articles out there, and there's every indication that this was made while Justin Trudeau was very active in the foundation, which would have been a conflict of interest for him. But he was found not guilty. So, I mean, the whole thing is just wild. And for Morris to go up there and be like, I didn't see anything, but here's a report saying that our elections are fine. I mean, what's going on here? I think it's every bit as bad as it looks. It's probably worse.
Even worse than it looks. These guys are all shamefaced. sycophants. They're so far up the butt of Justin Trudeau. $200,000, returned 7 years later. So I guess it's a $200,000 interest-free loan. I mean, they didn't even attempt to pay interest on that. But I mean, for the Liberals to give up money, I think that's a big deal. That to them, it's like, this really hurts. Look, we're giving back 200,000. We're banning TikTok. What more do you want? How about an inquiry into whether or not this prime minister is a Chinese asset who colluded with the Chinese to subvert certain seats? Somewhere between 11 and 15 is the number I'm hearing. Are you hearing that number as well, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're saying at least 11 seats. I have a list that I'm working on for sure. I'm not going to say who is on that list, but when you look back, it's kind of the same characters keep coming up over and over and over again. When you look back at some of these events that have been put on, pro-Beijing events and things like that, people where maybe, they would have been exposed to consulate officials and things like that who may have exerted influence or, plugged for certain candidates. So it's always the same, there's a pattern to it, and it really goes down to, I think, when we investigate this, we have to start investigating all of these third parties and these cultural associations and things like that, because I think that's where a lot of this influence can stem from, and where, candidates can get pressure exerted on them and things like that. And maybe get assistance from people who want to see their particular candidate in, from people who are outside of our country who have interest in having that candidate elected. We know that we've had soft on China policies since the Liberal government's been elected. That's not a secret, right? And we saw that have, tragic consequences, like take Anne Bang, right? That was the sale of our retirement homes. Again, that was somebody who lobbied Justin Trudeau at his Cash for Access fundraisers. Shortly after that sale was approved. It ended up being disastrous. The Chinese owner of Anne Bang, ended up going to jail for embezzlement. He stole billions of dollars. The retirement homes ended up being seized because our seniors were neglected. And so, these are the sort of bad deals that were made at a time when Justin Trudeau was bending over backwards to China. And I mean, I think he did so partly because he was naive, but partly also because we really wanted a free trade agreement. That was something that he really, really, really wanted. He wanted a free trade agreement with China. Him and Chrystia Freeland were really, really working hard on that. We had, a historic visit from the Chinese Premier, Li Keqiang. And a lot of these bad deals go back to that, right? When you look at mine sales, all of that stuff. I mean, that mine sale that I uncovered, that lithium mine sale, and it made quite a stir. We got, U.S. congressmen involved. We're still waiting to see the outcome of that investigation and why that wasn't subjected to a national security review. But I went back and I found a picture of Justin Trudeau with the overseas chair of Zijin Mining, posing for a picture with the
Man, you are a star. You're doing way better work than anybody in the media.
I actually,
I'm wondering if the Americans are getting more and more nervous, though.
So it's like,
this Trudeau guy, obviously a Chinese, maybe they're responsible for the leaks. But I got to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. You have also tweeted about the fact, Andy, that you have kind of been targeted, but the Chinese are really ticked off at you for what you're doing. There have been some thinly veiled threats leveled at you. Is that right? By the Chinese?
Not threats, but I have been getting some interesting messages. Just
like what?
Just asking me about my background, things like that, asking me about my children, my husband. So, some people are curious about me and what I'm doing. So, and I'm a little bit wary about that because, of course, my family is Chinese and my children are Chinese, and I've got family in Hong Kong and in China. And so, we always worry that, when you do this sort of stuff that you might subject your family members to backlash, right? So I haven't seen anything like that, but we did hear, I think it was on Power and Politics, about, some people who were pro Hong Kong who felt that, they had been subjected to backlash and they were scared for their families and things back home. So those are very real concerns that need to be taken a lot more seriously. And this is the sort of, subtle pressure that Beijing puts on um, expatriates and things like that, and ex-foreign nationals. If you sort of strike out against the regime, right, be aware that we might haul your family into a Chinese police station in China and question them, and that stuff really happens. I don't think it's going to happen to me, right? I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe one day I'll be there, but I'm not there yet. But it does happen, right? And it's a really, really real risk that people run into, and we've heard about people who are within our country who are scared for their family, who are still overseas and in China and things like that. So,
Wow.
Really, really sad time, and that we've allowed, Beijing to exert that sort of influence and have that sort of reach, and get away with this sort of intimidation, right? We should never be allowing Beijing to intimidate our own Canadian residents.
Well, it's already happened. So now we need a massive cleanup. And I don't know if anybody has the cojones to do it. Does Poilievre have, can a guy like that do it? I don't know. But right now, you've got clearly a compromised prime minister and a compromised leader of the third party. And it's like we're locked into this treacherous situation, dangerous situation. And how we get out of it, I don't know. But it's going to take a lot, like literally millions of Canadians demanding action and forcing all those backbench Liberals and New Democrat MPs to finally turn on their leaders. I think that's the answer here. How do people access your terrific content, Andy?
Oh, well, I'm just on Twitter, so I'm at Real Andy Lee Show. So if you want to follow me, go ahead and follow me. I do this in my spare time, so I do what I can with the tools that I've got, and those are basically zero tools.
Well, you got a great brain on. You got a good head between your shoulders, and I tell you are doing fantastic work. Fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who've done fantastic work, and it's really, really good to see all of that, being vindicated and things like that, and all of these concerns that date back to 2015 finally coming up. And let's hope that the RCMP doesn't find that whistleblower and that they keep on leaking, because
there is no RCMP anymore. They might as well be working. They might as well be one of China's police stations.
I definitely had him on my roster because he had visited this third-party voting alliance, so he was definitely on my radar. So it was really good that I saw CSIS come out and say, yeah, that was one of the candidates that we feel was influenced. But if more of it went on, we have to find out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We need
Andy,
to know.
thank you, appreciate it. See ya. Andy Lee. And let's take a break. Back with more News Talk Saga 960. Mark Petrano Show after this.